Judith, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Good after. Welcome to the Accessibility SIG and our launch of the Accessibility Toolkit. We want to welcome you all to the Accessibility Day we're planning today in honor of Worldwide Accessibility. I wanted to wish you a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Judith Hellestein. I'm the Secretary of the Accessibility SIG. And we just glad you were able to come. And we've been working on this tool, upgrading this toolkit that we started a couple of years ago. And I think this is an excellent time to launch the new version 2 of the Accessibility Toolkit with a forward by Andrew Sullivan, CEO and President of the Internet Society. So we look forward to having you come and stay with us for this hour and this talk on about the launching of this toolkit. And I will move you over now to Gunala. But in addition, Accessibility SIG has been been very active. We had we're halfway through our grant proposal on accessible meetings, what we've been doing for accessibility meetings and how to make meetings more accessible. We've had sessions on globally on all tips and trades of accessible meetings. We had one on accessible documents, and then we had a session on accessibility for hearing impaired and sign language. And we're always looking for new ideas. So if you have any, please let us know. And without that, I will turn us over to Gunilla Asbrink, who's our Vice President of the Accessibility SIG and who's going to run you through the toolkit. Gunilla? Gunilla, you're muted.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Accessibility SIG celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disability. I'm just cognizant that we welcome Andrew Sullivan, CEO and President of the Internet Society, and just want to make sure that we have the right order. If Andrew was speaking before me, can we just double check that, please?
Shabir?
Yes, Andrew was supposed to speak before Gunilla, so I request Judith if you could, yes.
Andrew, so sorry about that. I thought Gunilla might want to say a few words before opening it up, but I will just bring you over to Andrew Sullivan, who is President and CEO of the Internet Society, who has written the foreword to it. And so without much delay, I'll bring you over to Andrew. Andrew, launch us off.
Thank you so much. And thank you for welcoming me here today. The Internet Society likes to say that the internet is for everyone. Our vision is to make that aspiration the reality in the world. And this isn't for nothing. If 2020 has taught us anything, it is how human a technology, the internet, is. Sure, it's an exciting technical achievement, and sure, it brings us amusing diversions, without which, of course, we would all be bereft. But what it really does is connect us. It brings us opportunity. In 2020, when so many lives have been so terribly disrupted by a global pandemic and by enormous economic, political, and social upheaval in so many countries, we have been able to rely on the internet to try to keep ourselves together, to reach one another, to keep working, to share vital safety information, and just to keep our social bonds alive. Yet, for many people, too many people, this option remains elusive. There is, of course, the issue of basic access. Many people live without connectivity available, or without connectivity that they can afford, or without connectivity that is sufficient to meet their needs. But there is another problem. For some, when connectivity comes, it cannot be used because of other barriers that are built in. These barriers prevent everyone from using the technology effectively. Now, today, we are observing the International Day of Persons with Disability. This event is hosted by the Internet Society Special Interest Group on Accessibility to launch this Accessibility Toolkit. Internet Society Special Interest Groups, or SIGs, are organized around a particular topic of interest. And the idea is to focus attention on that dimension of the internet. And this one, accessibility, is especially important because it responds directly to our vision. The internet is for everyone. The internet's strength comes from its diversity and its inclusiveness. And this is not a social reality or a slogan, it's a technical fact. The internet is made up of different networks, serving many different communities. And so there are different deployment patterns. But because the internet works through open standards, in principle, anyone can join and use it, and things work without central controls. But whereas this approach promotes diversity and inclusion among technologies, the same is not so true for people. If we do not attend to the lessons that people with disabilities have to teach us about how we can be sure the internet is for everyone, we will miss out. When we fail to make online experiences accessible to everyone, we don't just deprive individuals of an opportunity. We exclude those voices and perspectives systematically. We don't get the feedback necessary to make things better the next time, and the next time, and so on. That means that we gradually build the internet in a way that excludes some people, which makes it weaker. We should make sure to include everyone, both because everyone deserves to be included and because we are all stronger when we include everyone. And of course, if we wish to build back better from this pandemic, we will need everyone's contributions. Societies and economies are made up of all of us. Before the pandemic came, we had plenty of work to do in order to include all members of society by making sure our technologies are accessible. Now that we must rebuild the economy and deal with the changes to the wider society that are inevitable after such a cataclysm, we can take the opportunity to make sure our technologies are inclusive. The thing is, the internet ought to be a totally natural technology to make a more inclusive society, using various applications that, through the internet, can keep us in touch with one another. In many ways, the internet is itself just an enormous assistive technology that permits everybody to surmount the limitations of space and time that we all share. It is natural, then, for us to make sure we use the internet in a way that is accessible to everyone who wants to participate. That puts demands on those of us who operate services and who host events. We need to make sure we are conforming to guidelines for accessibility. We need to make sure that we create online experiences that work for everybody. The Internet Society itself has some distance to go in realizing this goal. Some of our tools and events are less accessible than they ought to be. To pick one example, one of our priorities for 2021 is to fix our online learning systems so that they are finally accessible to everybody who might want to use them. This gap has been a long-standing problem. Our selection process this time for the next system explicitly includes this as a design goal so that we won't make this mistake again. I'm sorry we did it in the past, but I don't intend that we shall repeat it. This is a good illustration of why SIG special interest groups are so important. Not, of course, because they can shame the Internet Society into practicing what we preach, although that too. Rather, it is because the issues that cut across the Internet, like accessibility, need a focused community to work on them, to bring those issues to the fore and ensure that the Internet improves through tackling such issues. I'm proud that the Accessibility SIG is so active and that it works so hard to bring the issue of accessibility on the Internet the attention it deserves. But the rest of us who are not part of the SIG have a responsibility to listen and to learn. That way, we can realize that vision that the Internet is for everyone. I look forward to our discussion today, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for that great talk. And I'm really glad to see and hear what you have to say. We have so many, we've been waiting for so long for the a lot of the learning and the training programs to be fully accessible. And that's been a big push for us for a long time. So we're really heartened to hear that. And we'll be also really heartened to have an accessibility advocate as well, pushing through, making sure that we will have, that we won't do the same mistakes we had before, whereas rolling out a platform and then finding out that it was not accessible. So it's always great to see that such attention being paid to it. And so I'm really heartened to hear about that. So without further ado, I will, Gunilla wrote the first draft and also helped on the rewrite on the second. And so I will then turn it over to her for her presentation. And she has some slides that I will put up. Gunilla, that's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I will then put up the slides, and Jolly, tech person in back, will mastermind, make sure that everyone can see them. I will also put up a link to the slides in the chat, so the people who are using screen readers can actually follow along with it as well. So without further ado, let me just get the slides up. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Gunilla is all.
Okay, shall I start now?
Yes, I said
Okay.
stuff. And this is the front page of the slides.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Judith, for the introductions, and thank you very much, Andrew, for your keynote address. We really appreciate your support and the Internet Society's support in ensuring that the Internet is for everyone, and of course that includes persons with disability. As we know, there are over 1 billion people with disability globally, with 80% living in developing countries. So we're talking about one of the largest minority groups actually globally. And I was very heartened to hear Andrew's comments and commitments to ensure that the Internet Society's online training tools will be made accessible in the coming year. So the accessibility toolkit is something that I've worked with now for nearly 3 years, and through the support of the Internet Society. And this is an opportunity to update it with the latest policies and so forth. And thank you very much to Andrew for your introduction to the booklet of the toolkit. The booklet is one part of a toolkit which includes videos and so forth on the Internet Society's website. So if we go to the page with global accessibility drivers, please, Judith. Thank you. And we need to recognize that international treaties, standards, and guidelines promote an inclusive society and act as drivers for improving accessibility. And there are a number of these that we should consider and address. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are a significant part of this. We are looking here at 4 different goals that are relevant to persons with disability, but realizing, as Andrew mentioned, that accessibility is a cross-cutting issue. But here we're talking about quality education, employment, social, political, and economic inclusion, and transport. And all of these sustainable development goals refer to persons with disability and the need to address that. So that's one particular driver. Can we scroll down, please, Judith? And then we are talking about, just keep going, on the key legal instrument, the United Nations Convention, no, go back please, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, the UN CRPD. There's been over 180 governments that have ratified the convention, and this means that governments are obligated to abide by all the articles. And this includes Article 9, accessibility to ICT, and Article 21, access to information. So this is a foundation document that we always refer to in any accessibility work. More recently, last year, the UN developed a disability inclusion strategy, which means that UN agencies set a global example through a policy and accountability framework to accelerate change on disability inclusion. And they have a number of particular strategies, and this includes leadership. And one of the aspects there is to have a champion in senior management to move forwards on accessibility in an organization. And this is where we are very pleased that Andrew Sullivan will help us champion that, and there could be other senior ISOC staff as well. One other aspect I'd like to mention with the disability inclusion strategy of the UN is encouraging people with disability to be employed within an organization. Again, something that ISOC can aspire to. We also want to refer to W3C's Web Accessibility Initiative, and particularly the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1. There are other tools as well, the guidelines, the authoring tool accessibility guidelines, and the user agent accessibility guidelines. But let's just consider that web content accessibility guidelines is something that many governments use as either mandatory or a key focus point on ensuring that their online government services are accessible, and that certainly applies to any organization making sure their website is accessible. And of course, we want to ensure that ISOC strives towards that as well. The Marrakesh Treaty is important, especially for persons with visual impairments, to ensure that the production of books are made in accessible formats. Now, with public procurement, when Andrew touched on ensuring that the online training is accessible, this is actually a way to ensure that more hardware, software is accessible through initially government procurement guidelines, including accessibility criteria. This was started in the US under Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, and now there are standards across the European Union and in Australia to ensure the public procurement. But as I said, this is really important as well for any large organization to specify accessibility features when purchasing new software platforms, for example. And as an overall umbrella, the universal design or inclusive design leads to better design for everyone. And there are a number of principles of universal or inclusive design which can be used. Next slide, please. Or could you move it, please, Judith? Now, I've talked about the global accessibility drivers and on a policy level, but we have to action them. It's no good just having the policies, but something needs to happen. And if you could move down a little bit further, we have an example here of Bhaskar Bhattacharjee from Bangladesh, who has made use of those global policies and helped the government and NGOs in Bangladesh implement some of these. And I'm not sure now if Bhaskar is on the call, but if he is, later on he might want to explain some of those particular aspects. Could you go down again, please, Judith? So, making a difference. Here we are talking about the Internet Society has funded a number of disability projects in different countries across the world. And we welcome that. And I am in the Asia Pacific area, so it's wonderful to see that there have been accessibility programs, for example, in countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and there has been quite a lot happening. So this is not something that is abstract for the Internet Society and our accessibility special interest group, but everyone can contribute. This includes individuals and organizations. And if we go down one more page, Judith, we can see some of the ways that we all can make a difference. And I probably won't have time to go through each one, but I will just quickly mention the one is to develop technologies that incorporate inclusive design. We've mentioned that. Number 2 is to make use of W3C's web content accessibility guidelines. 3 is to encourage governments to abide by the CRPD. I've mentioned that. And 4 is to make sure that accessibility is supported at a senior level. 5 is to incorporate accessibility when developing technical standards, and Andrew mentioned that. 6 is to include people with disability in consultation and decision making. And we in the disability movement have a particular statement, nothing about us without us. People with disability have to be included in any design or policy making to make sure that the lived experience is there. Number 7 is to organize disability awareness training in your organization. That means that people in the organization understand why they are making a tool accessible. It stimulates the reasoning behind it. 8 is to use guidelines for arranging accessible meetings, online or face-to-face. This year, we know we've been using online meetings a lot for obvious reasons. And for example, here we're using Zoom with captioning and sign language interpretation with transcripts of all the conversations we are having in this webinar. And finally, 9 is to develop communications materials with accessibility in mind, caption videos, clear fonts and good contrast in both online and printed material. Okay, just to finish off, new technologies, including the Internet of Things, for example, make huge impacts on society. So let us make them accessible, available, and affordable for everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Gunilla, for that great presentation. And now we are going to have a few words from our president, Mohammed Shabir Alwan, otherwise known to us affectionately as the Shabir. But if we want to take, are the interpreters okay? Do you need to take a break? Because I know you had some technical, okay, that's fine. That's great. Okay, so Shabir, we'll take, Gunilla, thanks so much for your great talk. I just want to hand it over to Shabir for a moment. He wants to give a couple of words, and then we will go straight to our question and answer session. So Shabir.
Thank you very much, Judith. Thank you everyone for joining us from wherever you are in whatever part of the world. There is a lot that can be said and done about accessibility and inclusion. And after listening to what Andrew has spoken,
Yeah, Shabir, your camera is off.
give me just a second.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you, Jolly, for pointing that out. So after listening to what Andrew and Gunilla have pointed out, there is nothing for me to add to the discussion for now. Just a quick reminder to the people and who would see the videos afterwards that this accessibility toolkit is not infinite in itself. This provides just guidelines, just provides just indicators to policies, to different guidelines, to different streamlines which can be followed to make your organization, your policy, or your institution accessible. So it is not just the responsibility of the government, nor it is just the responsibility of the administration. It is an inclusive responsibility. We all will have to take the onus that if we want to live in a society which is inclusive and which is for everyone, we'll have all to work for it. So that's why I urge the administrations and organizations to make their systems, their policies, and most important of all, their websites and communications accessible for persons with disabilities and for everyone. As well as I also encourage people with disabilities to come forward to raise the issues, to raise their voice, because if they don't do it themselves, we would be far behind where we are today. So with these short remarks, I would like to thank everyone who joined us today, particularly Andrew, who have been in communication with us for the last 2 or 3 months or so. He kindly wrote the introduction for the booklet and the toolkit, which is now online. Jolly, if or Judith, if you can kindly share the link with us here in the chat. And also, there are other tools and articles on the Accessibility Toolkit page of the Internet Society. So you can go and explore. If you have any questions, our Accessibility SIG is there to help you out. Thank you. Judith, back to you.
Thanks so much, Shabir, for that great conversation. I posted in the chat the link to the PowerPoint, and I will also post the link to the toolkit. It is also on our website under there's a under menu bar. There's a toolkit drop down tab, and I am pasting the link now for the entire toolkit in the chat. And now I would like to open it up for question and answers. But first, we want to also talk about how Shabir said it's so important. We only know that a product is failing the accessibility issues if people mention it. If people don't come forward, we cannot do anything about it. So we depend on all our people to actually make noise, tell someone or tell us, and then we could tell others. We've been working with the Internet Society and ICON to make their products more accessible. And we found that people are indeed willing to make them accessible or work on it, but it just takes time. So without further ado, we have a Fazal M has his raised hand. Jolly, how do we give him voice? Oh, I guess I was upgrade him in a, oh, here it is. Okay, Fazal, you can unmute yourself and then you can ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, and I really do appreciate the link that you had, that you provided here. How can I access that? Because I cannot access here on my screen, or would it remain available after the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Fazal, yes, it is. The chat on Zoom is usually accessible.
Okay.
At least that's how Shabir has found that it is. So you can click on it. You can't copy it. You may not be able to copy and paste it, but you can click on it.
Okay, I can click it now, or can
You
I
can click it now or anytime. But it's also on our, it will always be on our website, which is accessibilitysig.org or A11YSig.org. And you'll find a lot of information on there.
Okay, I cannot find it. I would ask Shabir to send me afterward privately.
Okay, yeah, Shabir will do that.
Shabir sir, could you please send it to me? Yeah, yes, he would. Yeah. Okay,
all right, great. Okay. Do we have any other questions from our audience? I see we have some of our past panelists on here. and others. So we would love to hear any questions that you might have on it and going forward, or different ways of making your voice known. I know this until some people have, I will pick on people. So there is David Berman, who's spoken, other ones working a lot on accessibility in Canada. And we also have on here who was Andy Heath, who worked with the ITU and others. And so if either of those raise a question, let us know. Joe Catapano is here. If you have any issues on ICANN for North America, he'll happy to answer them. And Greg, our president, treasurer here. Greg, please, happy to hear from you.
Thank you. This is Greg Shatton for the record. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. I just wanted to offer a few observations from my own experience in dealing with web accessibility and digital accessibility, and especially the web content access guidelines, which Gunilla mentioned. And while these are an important tool or an important guideline, they're actually not a great functional tool. They can be hard to put into action because they're more a set of standards than they are a set of instructions. So there are good materials that can be found elsewhere, as well as, of course, consultants, because there are always consultants who can help turn these guidelines into action. That said, they're not completely, they are understandable and they are actionable. It's just that there's a gap between the two. So don't be frustrated. There are also quite a number of different tools out there for testing your website or your other materials, your apps and the like, to see if they're accessible. One is called Wave, another is called AIM. A lot of these can be used as Chrome extensions. I'm not endorsing any one of them, but they all have their own pluses and minuses. There are color contrast checkers of various different types, because that's always important, especially for those with certain visual disabilities and other and color blindness, as both of my sons have. And so the tools are a great thing to find, and some of them are quite easy to find and to use, and they are free, which is a good price. There are also some that are not so free and that are provided by consultants, because there are always consultants. And some of those are quite good as well. However, no tool is as good as a user with a disability that is relevant to the question. So no matter how many tools I use, I can't tell you what Shabir can tell you. I can't tell you what somebody who is employed by a consultant, because there are always consultants, who is employed by a consultant as a professional and trained checker, but who also has disability or disabilities. So just remember that the tools are necessary but not sufficient, and they may not even be necessary if you're working with a trained checker. They'll have their own tools plus their own lived experience as well, and training. So this is just some practical notes from the front, not as a programmer, because I'm not a programmer, but as somebody who is often an interface between business and technology and marketing folks and the like. And so I thought it was useful to mention that, in terms of putting the toolkit into action, as Gunilla noted, it is not, or maybe it was Shabir, it is not infinite, nor is it exhaustive. But then again, what could be? So I encourage you to look around. There's a lot of good guidance out there. a lot of good tools. Most important though is to be conscious of this need to be accessible and to encourage a culture of accessibility, to encourage accessibility by design, and to encourage in your organizations a focus on this, whether you are an ally or whether you have a disability. And I also like the nothing about us without us. It's all well and good to be an ally, but part of allyship should be bringing in people with disabilities to speak for themselves, because they can speak for themselves better than we can. Obviously, every ally helps and every angle helps, but in the end, this is a movement of people, not a movement merely about people. So I just wanted to offer those few observations, having watched the two excellent presentations by Gunilla and Andrew, and also admiring Andrew's splendid hair. Thank you very much, and I'll come back to you, Judith.
Thank you so much, Greg, for those words of advice, and they are words to be heard on. I next call upon Andy Heath, and I'll let him give a little introduction about himself and ask his questions. Andy?
Okay, actually, well, it's ISO that I've worked on for some time, not ITU, but I have dabbled in ITU as well. I think you're doing like really, really great stuff. I'd like to present a little bit of a radical idea that is quite difficult to progress. But just let me throw it out and see what happens. I think there's a missing level in all this stuff. You've got the goals at the top. You've got stuff at the bottom, which is detailed guidelines that apply to particular contexts. So you've got WCAG, applies to web, for example. It doesn't particularly apply to transport. It could apply to transport, okay? And there's this whole kind of stuff, whole kind of confusion in the middle. And as we know, the devil really is in the detail. We need people to do the detail right, but we also need them to understand why they're doing it and how they're doing it. And it's kind of a bit like software systems. There was this phase that people went through where we said, okay, look, there's middleware. You need to have middleware that makes it work. And some of this stuff that actually makes it work, I believe, is actually missing in terms of infrastructure, and is the reason why we find it hard. There is so much complexity in going from the goals, and let's start with sustainable development goals. They'll do for a start of, to actual reality on the ground, and so many different ways of doing it that it's a very, very hard bridge to cross. And as I see it, there's a missing infrastructure model in the middle that isn't actually there. Okay. Now, what I've worked on for some years is ways to actually make that infrastructure. And there's a couple of pieces of work we did goes all the way back to. Were any of you involved? I think you were, Andrea. I think you were the special working group on accessibility years ago that tried to say, okay, look, we've got to make these standards work together and apply a little bit more broadly. And out of that, over a long-term process, came stuff about user needs. Making things accessible is about talking about people. What we don't have on the map is any kind of framework that includes real user needs. We have little bits here and there in various standards, but there's no framework to put them together. I think there could be a framework to put them together, but it's very, very difficult to get off the ground because it requires many high-level organizations to take things on board, to compromise, to work together, and so on. But I think a major piece of missing infrastructure is about what real user needs there are, because they're fairly general. And they apply to the internet, they apply to meetings, they apply to transport, they apply to buildings, they apply to all sorts of stuff. Okay, so I'm just throwing this idea out. It's a little bit radical to say, how could we do this? I often have the effect of making everybody go quiet.
No, sorry, I got a call. But no, Andy, those are great suggestions, and love, and we should also follow. Do we
Judith,
have
should I take a shot at it?
Sure, Shabia,
Okay.
you're welcome.
So a couple of points before I come to Andy's point. Fazil Saab, you will receive the chat links and complete chat after this call. I have your email, and you will have that by 1:30 or so. Secondly, Greg points a very valid idea, which is that WCAG and these guidelines, they do not always serve the purpose. But the problem lies in the understanding that if these guidelines do not serve the purpose, then what does? Of course, one answer is the user testing. But what if the organizations do not have that user testing? Because for that, organizations will have to pay for certain amount, and they may not be able to get good quality service, human service from user testing. So this is a kind of snag where accessibility and the availability of accessibility can come and get stuck. But of course, a combination of both guidelines and the human testing is in my opinion, that's what gets the job done. Because at the end of the day, it's not the guideline that you want to follow. It's the content and the website and the device that you want to make accessible, and you want the people to be able to use it. So a guideline should not be treated as a scripture. Rather, it should be, and it is recommended that it should be taken as guideline to make the website accessible. And yes, if the organization can extend and get their resources into getting into human testing and all that stuff, that's all the more good for accessibility and for inclusion. Uh, Andy, your point, of course, is radical. It is new as well, but I see that it would be very difficult because it's not just just a single society. Internet society is a global society, and while at the same time, even in accessibility's sake, I'm not just now talking about the Internet Society and the issue that it deals with. I'm just talking about the accessibility issues within the accessibility special interest group. For instance, White House get penalized and gets dragged into the court during COVID-19 presentations, that these presentations were not made accessible for hard of hearing people. Sign language interpretation was not arranged, and it's on the record that the matter was taken to the court. At the same time, in people in countries like Bangladesh, there are banks who do not allow people with visual impairment to carry credit cards. They still demand, if a person has an account, they will have to come to the bank with an attendant, with a witness who would sign for them that they have withdrawn X, Y, or Z amount of amount, and they would sign for them. Then only they would be able to use the banking services, and they would be able to withdraw their money, which was the money actually they had put in the actual bank account. So we live in difficult situations, we live in different situations. That's why we will have to deal with the situations as they come before us. And it is difficult. Of course, it's an ideal situation where we have the problem and the solutions before us, but in real life we all know it doesn't happen like that. uh, we will have to deal with the situations as they come before us. Thank you.
Can I come back on that, please?
Yes.
Okay, it's not about testing. I'm not talking about testing. I'm talking about user needs. And you are perfectly right in that the context actually divides us. You know, the context of you're using a bank in India and somebody has to come with you to, it is a particular context and is a different context from I don't know, you're riding on a bus in England. It's completely different context. Okay, but what they have in common is user needs. If you need something which is like an alternative for audio, you may be noisy. It may be noisy, or you may have issues that you can't hear it. You need that whether you're in a bank in England or in India, or whether you are on a bus in England. It is the same need, and we don't have any common way to talk about those needs. And if we had, we could make a little bit more progress, because the devil gets hidden in the detail. Avoiding doing accessibility gets hidden in the detail. It divides us. This detail, we don't have any common way to talk about what needs actually are, and we need a common way to talk about that. If you take the World Development Goals, you know, how do you find out whether you are actually making serious progress on these? Well, the answer is you need user needs to begin to say, have you actually met them? What are the user needs in particular contexts to address particular world development, sustainable development goals? Okay, this is how you could implement them, but it's a huge step to actually get it. And the agendas of many people, many organizations, including many vendors, corporations, and whatever, is not to do that. And you focus on WCAG, you focus on the solutions, but the solutions divide us. The needs are common across different scenarios, but solutions may be different in different scenarios, right? And so focusing only on the solutions, which is what we do now, is a way of dividing us and putting us at the mercy of what people want to implement and what corporations want to implement particularly, but any organizations. Okay, so it's not testing that I'm talking about, it's a missing level in all of this. And I appreciate that's a very radical idea, and I'm just throwing it out to see what the reaction is.
Thanks so much, Andy, for your ideas, and we'll have a great discussion on them. Right now, we have another question from Sivas. Sivas.
Yes. So far, the work by accessibility working groups are largely in terms of asking for accessibility features in the internet. I mean, largely, and but we have 1 billion people with some kind of accessibility problem or other, which is almost 20% of the world population. Just as we have a mobile version of a website and a desktop version of a website, is it possible that we can also have an accessibility version of a website and major web applications like email or YouTube video, a whole new segment or whole new version of the application and websites? This may not happen internet wide, may not be implementable by small websites, small applications, but for most important content, this may be possible. Just like m.google.com, if there is a.gmail.com with its own design, just thinking
Sivas,
aloud.
yeah, great question. I'm going to direct that to Andrew, because before Andrew was on there, he was on the Internet Architecture Board. And so he's going to be the best person.
Okay, I can talk about this a little bit. So part of the answer to this is yes, you could do it, because the way most of the differences between, for instance, mobile sites and standard desktop sites, a lot of those differences are really just a style sheet um, difference, right? A cascading style sheet that implements the differences in the layout rather than the differences in in any content. The important thing, however, is that the underlying system needs to have appropriate accessibility features already enabled, or it won't work, which is also true of mobile sites, for instance. If you don't have the necessary layout information in the markup, then it becomes impossible for the style sheet to be imposed, and you can't get a different site for mobile and for desktop. There's another limitation, however, and that is that whereas you can usually tell that a mobile client is coming from it's a mobile device because the user agent tells you that, most of the time, people who are using accessibility features are often using extensions of other software. So it becomes difficult to identify that the software is a mobile or is an accessibility request. It just looks like the same client. So that could be a little bit difficult. And then finally, as somebody actually in the chat is saying, there's a question about whether you really want to create this as a sort of second or a third or fourth kind of version of the same site, because then that's a site that then needs to be maintained as well. And what you really want to do is make all of the internet accessible to everybody. So I mean, I can see some merit in it, but I also think that if we got the accessibility, the accessible internet the way we wanted, we wouldn't need a secondary site for this kind of thing.
Thanks so much, Andrew, for that answer. And I definitely agree. Greg, you had a hand up. So
Thanks.
I'll turn to you.
Greg Shatman, just to respond briefly on the last 2 points. I agree with in the chat from ISOC Live, which I believe is Jolie, that the idea is to make universal accessibility. So this has really hit a philosophical nerve. I've been involved in web accessibility for probably 7 or 8 years, and there have been times when the idea of an alternative accessible site, or go here for the accessible site sort of solution, has been promoted, but by and large it is disfavored. The idea is to make the primary site the accessible site, but and that this should work somewhat like responsive sites, in the sense that in the olden days there were separate mobile sites that were completely divorced in terms of development from the website. But now most sites are responsive, and it's the same site just being styled differently as it hits different platforms. So I think that is still the goal here, is to have the site. But Andrew may have hit on an issue, which is, is there a proper recognition so that the formatting can be done? Is it acceptable to have a separate but equal site? And is it going to stay separate but equal? Because separate but equal usually isn't equal. So, my tendency is to want to stick with the trend that we have now, which is toward a single accessible site, but to look at how to improve that experience, both for the accessibility oriented user and for the general user. And there needs to be more, I think, on the fly customization, more responsiveness, if you will, so that the accessible user gets something that's good for them, and the cis user, if you will, cis-able user is able to get what they want, even if it's a different color contrast. And last, I think on Andy's points, I think it was I'm hopeful that there is a more holistic way of looking at the needs, the accessibility needs of people. And if there isn't, though, it's something I'm interested in looking at, and would be happy to converse with offline to see whether there is something that's in between the kind of grand statements on the one hand and the technical solutions on the other hand, the kind of cast, the accessibility cast of characters, so to speak, by their various vital needs that can then be applied to everything from getting on a bus to getting on a website. And so that's an interesting question about how to bring that layer forward. Context is obviously king, but I think the more that you define the universality of accessibility needs, the harder it is to ignore them, because it's not a web accessibility problem. It's an accessibility problem that happens to be on the web. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Greg. This has been a really great discussion. And I loved all these questions and frameworks. And if anyone wants to send any more comments and feedback, you could please send it on to us or to info@accessibilitysig.org. And we could add them all to the record. But I wanted to close out, and I think Shabir our president wanted to close out the session right now, so I'll just hand it over to him. Shabir?
Before I thank everyone, and I have just to thank everyone, Andrew, do you have any last words?
That's very kind of you, but I think people have heard enough of me, so please, I leave it with you.
Yes, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. And I know it is a very busy day. And thank you for taking out the time to join us to participate in this discussion. Thanks to my team, Ganela, Judith, Jolly, and Greg, for making this initiative and SIG accessible and possible. Also, we are thankful to the interpreters, to the captioners, and to the ISOC communication team, Kelly, and all those guys who have worked with us behind the lines to make this event possible. So thank you very much once again, and stay tuned with us. We will try to make internet, as Internet Society say, a force for good for everyone. Thank you.